Why am I hearing baby cries from beneath my bed? What is going on in this house? Annabelle thought to herself after another miscarriage and a strange baby cries at 2:18 a.m. Welcome to Treeside Tales, a home of unique African folk tales. From the moment Ujam and Annabelle stepped through the tall iron gates of the New Haven estate, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. The air smelled of hibiscus and new beginnings, the streets were clean and quiet, and uniformed security men gave polite nods as they drove in. After months of back and forth with real estate agents, shady landlords, and overpriced mini-flats, this house felt like a reward from God himself. It was a massive duplex with white walls and navy blue trimmings, standing tall like it had been waiting just for them. The compound could take 4 cars comfortably, the backyard had space for a garden, and inside, my God, the marble floors sparkled as if they were polished with diamond dust. The kitchen looked like something out of a home magazine. Annabelle had stood there for a whole minute on the day they first toured it, just imagining herself cooking Sunday rice while their future children played in the living room. They signed the paperwork without hesitation. "Are you sure we're not dreaming?" she whispered to Ujam as they stood hand in hand in the empty living room, echoing with their footsteps. "If this is a dream, let's not wake up," he smiled, wrapping his arms around her. They moved in a week later with boxes, laughter, and big plans. Friends came to help, taking selfies, eating jollof, and hyping them endlessly. "Ha! See mansion!" someone shouted. "Ujam, you've made it oh!" At night, when the guests had gone and the estate lights glowed like scattered stars, Ujam and Annabelle sat on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the city blink in the distance. "This is home," she said quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. He kissed her forehead. "Yes, and it's just the beginning." Everything felt perfect. They were in love. The house was beautiful. The estate was peaceful. It was exactly the fresh start they wanted, a place to raise children, build wealth, and write the next chapters of their lives. But neither of them noticed the cold or the way the lights in the hallway flickered once before staying still. They were carried away by the beauty of the house and the interior. The first month passed like a dream. Annabelle filled the house with warmth, hanging curtains, arranging their wedding pictures, painting the nursery, even though there was no baby yet. Ujam spoiled her with late-night suya runs and morning kisses. Every room echoed with laughter and soft music. Neighbors were kind, the estate quiet. It was everything they had prayed for. Then came the news. She was pregnant. It was barely the 2nd month when she missed her period and took the test. The 2 lines stared back at her. Clear, bold, positive. She screamed, laughing through tears, clutching the test strip in her hands. Ujam lifted her off the floor, spinning her gently, his eyes misty with joy. "This house will hear baby cries soon," he whispered, placing a hand over her belly. But it happened 4 weeks in. The first time she heard it, she thought she was dreaming. A soft, pitiful cry of a newborn. It came from under their bed, faint but unmistakable. She stirred in her sleep, her hand reaching for Ujam. He was fast asleep. The clock blinked 2:18 a.m. The sound vanished the moment she opened her eyes. She sat up, confused and suddenly cold. Something didn't feel right. She gasped when she looked down. Blood. Her nightgown was soaked. They rushed to the hospital. The doctor confirmed what she already feared. She had lost the pregnancy. There was no clear medical explanation, no trauma, no infection. Her vitals were normal. The doctors called it a spontaneous miscarriage, handed her painkillers and sympathy, and told her to rest. She wept for nights. But Ujam was her anchor, holding her, comforting her, whispering prayers over her at midnight. They said it wasn't her fault, that it was early, that they would try again. So they did. 3 months later, she conceived again, and exactly at the 4th week, it started again. The baby cries, software mournful, always at 2:18 a.m. Always from under their bed. She would wake up with a jolt and blood. Another loss. Same hospital, same silence, same confusion. This time, Annabelle didn't cry immediately. She just sat in the car, numb, her hands clenched over her stomach. "It's this house," she muttered without looking at Ujam. He turned slowly. "What did you say?" "This house. There's something wrong with this place. I feel it." He stared at her, not wanting to believe. But even he had started noticing the chill at night, the way lights dimmed near the stairwell, how their bedroom sometimes smelled faintly like iron, like blood, but they still continued living there, hoping that whatever was happening would one day come to an end. The house had gone quiet, too quiet. It had been 2 months since Annabelle's second miscarriage. The laughter that once filled the rooms had faded into whispers and silence. The baby items they had excitedly ordered now sat untouched in cartons in the guest room. Annabelle spent most days sitting by the window, staring into nothing. Ujam tried to stay strong, but even he had grown quieter, more distant, as if grief had hollowed something inside him. They stopped trying to explain the losses, stopped going to church, stopped talking about the future. Then came that night. It was a humid Tuesday. They had both fallen into an uneasy sleep, barely speaking. The time was 2:18 a.m. when it happened. The sound sliced through the silence like a knife. A baby's cry again. It was right beneath their bed. Annabelle sat bolt upright, her heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" Ujam's eyes flew open. "What the hell?" That was the first time Ujam heard it. It's been only Annabelle, but tonight Ujam heard it for the first time. It was unmistakable. A baby, crying, underneath them. They looked at each other. Neither of them moved at first. Then slowly, as if in a trance, Ujam swung his legs off the bed. The tiles were cold beneath his feet. He crouched low, lifted the bed skirt, and peered underneath. Nothing, just darkness and shadows. But the crying didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. Annabelle stood up, trembling. "Check properly," she whispered. Ujam nodded, gripped the edge of the bed, and pulled it away from the wall in one swift, panicked motion. The bed scraped harshly against the tiles. The sound didn't move with it. They both froze. The crying was still coming from the same spot, directly on the tiled floor where the bed had just been. Ujam knelt and pressed his ear to the tile, his face drained of all color. "It's coming from inside the floor," he whispered. Annabelle backed away, one hand to her mouth. "Jesus, Ujam." He stood up abruptly. "This is not normal," he muttered. This is not grief. This is something else." She shook her head, eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave." "Not yet," he said slowly, his voice shaking. "We need to find out what is under this floor, because if a baby was crying beneath their bedroom, something or someone was buried there." The crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun. 1 second it pierced their ears, the next, silence, thick and unnatural. Ujam and Annabelle stood frozen, their breaths shallow, the bed shoved awkwardly to the side, exposing the exact spot on the tiled floor where the cries had emerged. No crack, no opening, just cold, pale ceramic that gleamed slightly under the ceiling light, as if mocking them. Annabelle stepped back, trembling. "This house is not normal. I'm telling you, Ujam, this place, something is wrong here." Ujam didn't answer. He was staring at the floor, His brows furrowed. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Go and get my hammer." The small one. From the toolbox, her eyes widened. "What are you doing?" He didn't look at her. "Just get it." She hesitated, then turned and left the room. Her footsteps echoed through the hallway like someone running through a tunnel. Every shadow seemed longer. Every corner felt like it was watching. She returned quickly, handing him the hammer with a trembling hand. He knelt, and without a word raised the hammer and struck the tile. Clang. It rang out, loud and sharp. The tile didn't crack. He hit it again. And again. Sweat beaded his forehead. The third strike broke the tile into uneven pieces. Beneath it was a layer of dry cement. Dust lifted into the air. He coughed and waved it away. "What are you even looking for?" Annabelle whispered. "You think there's a baby down there?" "I don't know," he muttered, lifting another piece of tile. "But something is beneath this floor, something that doesn't want us here." As he chipped away the last fragment, his hand paused. A scent escaped the broken ground. Sour, metallic. Annabelle gagged, clutching her nose. "Oh God, what is that smell?" Ujam looked at her slowly. His face had gone pale. His eyes didn't blink. He reached down and scraped at the gray powder with his fingers. That's when they both saw it. A patch of something beneath the dust. Something dark brown, not quite soil, not cement either. It looked like fabric, old, decayed fabric, and it was wrapped around something. He didn't touch it. He couldn't. He just stared. "That's cloth. That's burial cloth." Annabelle backed away, a strangled cry escaping her lips. Suddenly the light in the room blinked, once, twice, then went out completely. The air turned ice cold, and then in the darkness, from right beside them, a voice whispered, so close it brushed past Annabelle's ear. "Give me back my child," she screamed. Ujam leapt to his feet and grabbed her. They stumbled backward, nearly falling over the shifted bed. He fumbled for his phone, turned on the flashlight, and swept the beam across the room. It was empty, but something had spoken. Something was here, and it was only just beginning. They both clung to themselves till daybreak. The morning light did nothing to ease the tension in their bones. Ujam hadn't slept. Annabelle sat curled on the couch, arms around her knees, flinching at every sound from upstairs. The tile was still broken. The bedroom door remained locked, but the whisper haunted them both. "Give me back my child." By noon, Ujam grabbed his car keys and said, "I'm going to the estate office. I need answers." Annabelle only nodded, her eyes distant. The estate office was a small bungalow at the front of the compound, flanked by trimmed hedges and a small fountain that now felt oddly out of place, too cheerful for a place with such heavy questions. The estate manager, a young man in his early 30s, welcomed Ujam with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sir. You're from 17B, right?" "Yes," Ujam said, barely returning the smile. "We moved in 5 months ago." "Hope the house is treating you well." Ujam paused, then leaned forward. "Actually, that's why I'm here." The manager straightened slightly, sensing the seriousness in Ujam's voice. "I need to know about the last occupants of that house. Who lived there before us?" The manager blinked. "The last occupants?" "Yes." There was a pause before the man responded. "I'm afraid I can't say. I just got this job 3 months ago. The handover was very rushed, files incomplete. There were no records of that particular house in the stack I got." Ujam frowned. "You have nothing?" He shook his head. "The house was locked and vacant when I came in. I was told it had been empty for a long time. Why? Is there a problem?" Ujam didn't know how to answer. He hesitated. "We keep hearing sounds, cries, at night, and other strange things." The man's face darkened slightly, but he didn't look surprised. "You're not the first person to say something like that," he muttered, almost to himself. "What do you mean?" Ujam asked sharply. The manager shook his head. "Nothing. I just meant some of these old houses have histories, but without proper records it's hard to say what really happened. So nobody knows anything about who lived there." "Not from this office," the man said quietly. "But if you're hearing cries, maybe you should talk to someone in the estate who's been around longer. The security chief, perhaps, or an elderly neighbor." Ujam nodded slowly. His mind raced. No files, no names, no history, only shadows. And that voice. He returned home to find Annabel standing in the hallway, staring up the stairs. "What is it?" he asked, heart instantly on alert. Her voice was low, unsteady. "I heard it again." His blood ran cold. "The crying?" She shook her head. "No, not crying." He stepped closer. "Then what?" Her eyes met his, wide with terror. It was humming. A woman's voice, soft, like a lullaby. Then she added, almost whispering, "But Ujam, there's no one in this house except us." Fear gripped them both, but Ujam, as a man, needed to prove otherwise and protect his wife. That night, neither of them slept. Annabel lay stiffly on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, creaking circles. Ujam paced quietly by the window, peeking through the blinds every few minutes like he expected something, or someone, to be watching. By morning, they had a plan. If the estate manager didn't know anything, maybe someone else did. Anyone. A neighbor. The estate security chief. The landlord. Anyone who could give them even the smallest clue about why a woman was humming lullabies in their hallway at 2:18 a.m. The security office was small, just beside the estate gate, manned by a tall, lean man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He introduced himself as Officer Solomon and listened carefully as Ujam and Annabel explained what had been happening. Cries, cold air, darkness. Now, singing. The officer said nothing for a long moment, just stared at them with an unreadable expression. Then he sighed. "I've worked in this estate for 8 years," he said finally, "and I mind my business." Ujam frowned. "So you do know something?" The officer's eyes didn't blink. "I didn't say that. I said I mind my business. Some things are best left where they are." Annabel leaned forward, her voice breaking. "Sir, I've lost 2 pregnancies. 2. And now, this. We just need to know what we're dealing with." But the man shook his head. "If I were you, I'd pray, not dig." They left with heavy hearts and no answers. Next, they tried the landlord. They had only met him once, briefly, on the day they signed the final paperwork. A man in his late 50s, calm and professional, dressed in a native outfit with a wide-brimmed hat. He had spoken softly and avoided eye contact, but seemed eager to finalize the deal. Ujam called him that evening. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. Annabel tried too. Voicemail. They sent text messages, emails. Nothing. It was like the man had vanished, or worse, like he was hiding. When Ujam finally sent a message saying, "We need to talk. It's urgent. Something is wrong with this house," the only response came an hour later. A single word reply. "Sorry." That was it. No explanation. No visit. No follow-up. Just sorry. Annabel stood in the middle of their bedroom that night, staring at the repaired tiles. Ujam had covered the broken section earlier that day, patching it up as best he could, but the floor still felt different, off, like it was holding a secret and daring them to ask again. "We're not going to get answers, are we?" she asked quietly. Ujam stood behind her, rubbing his forehead. "Not from anyone in this estate." "Then what do we do?" He didn't respond. He didn't have an answer. They went to bed with their backs to each other, the silence between them louder than any whisper. But at exactly 2:18 a.m., the silence broke again. Not with crying, not with humming, but with something worse. The slow creak of a rocking chair, back and forth, back and forth. Yet they owned no rocking chair. The night pressed heavily around them like a shroud. 2:18 a.m. Right on time. Ujam sat up in bed, chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. Annabelle was already awake, her eyes wide in the dark, locked on the floor beside the bed. The sound was different tonight. Not crying, not humming. It was the unmistakable rhythmic sound of something rocking, like an old wooden chair scraping softly against concrete, back and forth, back and forth. Underneath the floor, Annabelle whispered, "Ujam, do you hear it?" He nodded, frozen. It was directly below them again. He got up slowly and knelt beside the edge of the bed. His hand hovered over the cold tile as the sound continued, faint but deliberate. There was no chair in the room. No furniture could be rocking. But the sound persisted, like someone was soothing an invisible child beneath their feet. Suddenly, it stopped. Dead silence. Annabelle stayed seated on the bed, clutching the duvet to her chest. Then tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, from underneath the floor, right beneath them. Ujam shot to his feet, backing away. This isn't normal. This is not normal. Annabelle was already crying. "Ujam, we need help. We need to leave, please. This house is cursed." But something in him snapped. Maybe it was fear, or exhaustion, or the helplessness of watching his wife break apart piece by piece. He grabbed the hammer again from the wardrobe corner and dropped to his knees. "If no one will tell us what happened here, I'll find out myself." "Stop!" she screamed. "You don't know what you're opening." He struck the tile once, clang, again, crack. The floor splintered along the old fracture line he had covered days ago. Annabelle buried her face in her hands, trembling, whispering prayers beneath her breath. As the final piece came loose, a stench rose, sharp, rotting, and thick with something ancient. Ujam gagged, covering his nose. Then he saw it. Beneath the broken tile was a layer of dirt, fresh, not cemented, not packed. It shifted as if it had been recently disturbed. He reached out slowly, brushing the dirt aside with shaky fingers. The final blow shattered the last tile clean in half. Ujam dropped the hammer with a clatter, his breath hitching as the dust cleared. Annabelle didn't dare speak. She clutched the bedpost, her knuckles white, her lips trembling with silent prayers she couldn't remember how to finish. Then they both saw it. Not bones, not cloth, not a body, but a small casket, no longer than a newborn's length, wedged tightly beneath the tiled floor, packed into the soil like it had been hidden in a hurry. The wood was worn, the surface cracked. There were faint carvings along the edge, barely legible letters now faded by time and moisture, but they didn't need to read them. They knew what it meant. It was a child's coffin, and it was right beneath their bed. Annabelle's scream never fully escaped her throat. It broke midway and melted into a breathless gasp. Her knees buckled. Ujam reached for her, but he couldn't speak either. His voice was caught between terror and disbelief. How long had it been there? How many nights had they slept above it? Then, from that broken space in the floor, came the sound again, the cry. But this time, louder. Angrier, real. The shrill wail of a baby erupted from the tiles like a siren, not distant, not ghostly, but as if something had awakened and wanted, needed to be heard. The walls groaned, the ceiling creaked, the lights above them blew out in a violent spark, plunging them into darkness. The crying swelled, filling the house like rising water. It came from the floor, the walls, the windows. It pressed into their skulls, clawing at their ears, their hearts. Then came the whispers. Hundreds of them, male, female, young, old, chanting, weeping, accusing. Why did you open it? She buried him alive. They all heard him cry. No one came. Annabel screamed and bolted for the door. Ujam didn't think. He just ran after her. They fled, barefoot, half-dressed, into the night. The moment they stepped outside, the house behind them seemed to exhale, as if relieved they were finally gone. But the cries followed, not just from the floor now, but from the windows, the roof, the compound. The baby cried louder than ever before, no longer pitiful, furious, as though mourning had turned to vengeance. The very air around the house vibrated with grief and rage. Ujam and Annabel ran down the silent estate road, feet slapping against the pavement, not daring to look back. They didn't take their phones. They didn't lock the doors. They didn't even grab shoes. They just ran, and no one saw them again. By morning, their gate was wide open. The house was empty. The bed was pushed aside, the tiles broken, the floor torn open. But the casket was gone. Neighbors claimed they'd heard nothing during the night, though one woman swore she dreamed of a baby crying, only to wake up to blood on her bedroom window. Others dismissed it as nonsense. The estate guard said no one passed through the gates. The landlord refused to comment. He never answered calls about the house again. A few months later, the property was quietly removed from listings, and 17B still sits at the far end of the street in New Haven Estate. Untouched, windows shut, curtains drawn, silent by day. But at night, residents whisper of faint crying, always at 2:18 a.m. No one dares go near, no one dares move in. As for Ujam and Annabel, no calls, no sightings, no messages. Their families reported them missing, their bank accounts untouched, phones switched off. It's like the house swallowed them whole. But some say they made it out, that they're somewhere far away, living quietly under new names, trying to forget the house, trying to forget the sound, and we can only pray that wherever they are now, they are safe, and that they never hear that cry again. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe.